What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey McLaury. So today's a very special episode. Got my good friend Spencer Bono back here on the podcast. We're going to give our late NFL draft recap and thoughts on how everything went. Obviously, the NFL draft's been over a month ago now, but we're going to give our thoughts on it, give some of our favorite picks, and some overall takeaways as well. But how are you doing today, Spencer?
Doing great, Joey. Thank you for having me. And, better late than never, so I'm happy we're able to do this and get this done.
This is awesome. I mean, this is great having you back on here. No one knows football better than you do, so being able to have you on and get a lot of your expertise and everything is truly an honor. So thank you for the time.
Appreciate you, Joey.
100%. We'll dive into some overall takeaways, right? So obviously now the draft's been a month ago, so some of the headlines have obviously lessened. No one's really talking about Shedeur Sanders falling or the Jaguars trading up for Travis Hunter. But I think those two things, at least in my eyes, were the biggest parts of the draft, the biggest storylines of the draft. Obviously, Jacksonville trading up to get Travis Hunter and going up and jumping with the Cleveland Browns. That was very unexpected. I know there was a lot going on behind the scenes that nobody really saw. Heading up into the draft about 2 weeks before it, I guess they were talking about trading up Jacksonville and Cleveland. But that was pretty crazy. What were your thoughts on that trade package, which they gave up a lot? Jacksonville sent, and this is from the NFL.com article, they sent the number 5 pick, number 36 pick, and the number 126 pick, so 3 picks right there on the 2025 draft, and that first-round pick in 2026 to Cleveland for the number 2 pick, the number 104 pick, and the number 200 pick. So that's a lot of draft capital. What were your thoughts on that trade up there?
I thought that the Browns really won that trade. It led to Mason Graham. It led to, I want to say, Quinshon Judkins, and I believe Harold Fannin. I think he was that pick with 126.
Yep.
Or it might have been Dylan Sampson. Either way, they got three really good players from trading back, 3 spots. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was the right move for them. Jacksonville, I thought they gave up a bit much. I do think Travis Hunter is fantastic, so nothing against him. But it's a lot. I think they also got next year's first round pick. So it's a big gamble. It really is. It's hard to say if it's going to pay off or not until it actually does or it doesn't. But I'd say in the short term, Cleveland definitely won that trade and got better for next year. And I think they had one of my favorite drafts. I'll talk about that later on. But they had an amazing draft. And going back to Shedeur, I think picking him up in the 5th was unexpected as well. But I think it was very good for them. I think he's going to be in a good spot there. I think a lot of teams didn't want the attention probably with Shedeur Sanders and then everything that comes with him, but he's still a phenomenal quarterback, so, it doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. It just matters if he can perform. Part of me was wondering if he was trying to tank his draft stock intentionally to get go somewhere he really wanted to go to, but I'm not really too sure. The Browns did also draft Dylan Gabriel, which I was a little bit shocked by. I was probably the only draft pick they made. I was like, I don't really know why they made the pick, but you never know. You can't have too many good quarterbacks, so they'll have them compete and see who's going to be the best starting quarterback for it's probably going to end up being Joe Flacco to start the year, but I think Shedeur will be behind him for a little bit. I think it's a good spot for them. They got a really good young core coming in, so I think overall Cleveland won that trade, but you never know. Travis Hunter could end up being one of the greatest players of all time, and then people are going to look back and say it's worth it. But it's hard to say that now.
Definitely.
A lot of pressure.
100%. And Gladstone, the GM of the Jaguars, is very young, only 34 years old, first-time GM. So
from the Rams, right?
Yes. Went from the Rams and now being in the front office, now being Jacksonville's GM. So obviously he was taking a swing for the fences just to see how things would go. And like you said, you never really know how things will play out. I just think when you look at it in the moment, that's a lot to trade up, a lot to give up to go and get Travis Hunter, especially that's like a trade-up you go and make for a quarterback. If you think there's the quarterback that you like, that's the trade you go make for a franchise-changing piece, which Travis Hunter's an excellent player, and honestly, I don't mind this move. I actually like it. I just think they gave up probably a little too much, like you said. And obviously, with the Browns getting Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, I didn't think Shedeur Sanders would fall out of round 1. I thought maybe pick 20 at worst. Yeah. Then day 2 comes along, and he kept falling. And then day 3 comes along. Okay, now he's out of the 4th round. Now he's at the back end of the 5th round. It was pretty crazy to watch all that. He ends up going 154th overall, and then, obviously a 5th-round pick. Nobody really saw that coming. I do think what you said was correct, though. I think, obviously, what comes off the field, Obviously distractions. That was something a lot of people talked about, thinking he could be a distraction in the locker room. And then also he wasn't prepared for some interviews is what I heard. And then also you never know with some quarterbacks. I mean, every GM, every scout's going to see it differently. So I'm sure there were some scouts that maybe thought he wouldn't fit in the NFL. But I still find it crazy, even if, right, things don't pan out and he's not, a successful quarterback in the NFL.
He's not a phenomenal quarterback. I still think he'll be,
serviceable
a nice
player.
role quarterback who
like a
will
backup,
at least, at bare minimum,
I agree.
He has definitely the potential to be, I don't know, all pro. That'd be maybe a bit of a stretch, but that's what you're hoping for. Yeah. Pro Bowl for sure. That's his potential, but it's like, especially with fifth round value, it's a lot of value in the fifth round.
Definitely, that's what was most shocking, and that's why I thought it was a great pick here for Cleveland, taking him in the fifth round. You might as well throw some dots to the board, see how it hits, and if you end up getting the right guy, that's awesome, especially value-wise in the fifth round. I thought a lot more teams would take that same thought and draft him in the second round, third round, fourth round when he kept falling because the value was great, I thought. And this is coming from a person that wasn't a big Shedeur Sanders fan. I didn't want the Giants to take him at number 3. Obviously, did not go and do that, which was obviously a gift at the end of the day because they end up getting Abdul Carter and then get Jackson Dart, and then you know what I mean. So things did work out for them, the Giants. Rather than overdrafting a guy like we've done in the past, we went and traded back up and got Jackson Dart into the first round. And if we took Sanders and Dart at 3, I would not have been happy because I thought the value wasn't great there. I would not have wanted to take either one of them there. But I always said if Dart falls to the late part of the first round, have the Giants trade up. That was always my goal, and that's something I said in February on the podcast, or in January, that I would love the Giants to trade up and get Jackson Dart. It might have even been before that. Could have been November, December. Like it was.
I liked your draft.
It was a while ago. Oh, 100%. We'll get to that too, the Giants and how they picked. But overall takeaways, though, I mean, I know they're both Colorado guys, and that's kind of how we started this episode. But I think, at least in my eyes, those are the two biggest storylines. Shedeur Sanders obviously falling to the 5th round, which at the end of the day, it seems like a lot of teams probably didn't have him on their board. They just said completely, we're not going to draft him, even if the value's great. Cleveland's in a position, like you said, where they throw some dots on the board. They got Joe Flacco to probably start the year. I think Shedeur probably ends up taking over around week 6 or 7. Give him a chance to see how things go. At that point, the value was great in the 5th round. You might as well take a chance. And then if things don't work out and they end up cutting him in the future, let's say, you only cut a 5th round pick, which happens every single year.
And with such a trade haul they got with Jacksonville, it's a no-brainer.
100%.
Again, the only question is Dylan Gabriel. Is that worth it? Again, it can't. It's having. Yeah, they had enough picks where they can make it make sense, but we'll see how that goes. You never know.
Definitely.
Quarterbacks are one of the hardest positions, probably the hardest position to evaluate in all of sports. It's like you see a lot of quarterbacks every single year that are amazing in college who end up being borderline backups in the NFL. It happens and you see guys who were okay in college end up being all pros. It happens every year. It's crazy, but. I thought it was a good draft, an interesting draft overall. I was really invested in this year's draft with the Bengals and the Giants. They had a good draft as well. I was really excited to see them take some good picks. Yeah, for sure, definitely. And I think that's a great segue into us talking about our 5 favorite team drafts, which we each have. For the most part, there are some similarities, but there's definitely some differences in ours, which is awesome. So we're going to just give a quick synopsis, a look into each of these teams and how they drafted. So we already talked about the Cleveland Browns. That was my number 1 team draft. They did take 2 running backs, which was interesting, getting Judkins and then obviously Dylan Sampson. Interesting there, but they added obviously a lot of versatility and a lot of value. And in the NFL today, you need guys that can catch out of the backfield. And Sampson's great. Electric player too, which is an excellent pick to an offense that struggled to move the ball at times, especially now with Nick Chubb getting older and I think he's a free agent. It made sense to go out and add 2 young running backs. They're a very good combo as well. I mean, it's similar to the relationship that Judkins had with Travion Henderson at Ohio State. Henderson being closer to what Sampson's plays like as well. I think it's going to be a good combination. You have Judkins as more of a power back, and Dylan Sampson is more of a guy who can play off the ball if he needs to. I think they're both very good draft picks overall. They're one of my top 5 as well, so we both won't take a big segment on it, but. They also got Harold Finn, one of your favorite players in the entire draft.
3rd round too, 67th overall is where they got him.
And
so
as a Bengals fan, I was just annoyed because every single time I feel like the teams that we play a lot, like our division or like the Chiefs or the Bills, they always seem to draft really well. Draft players I was really high on. They got Harold Finn, they got Mason Graham, Dylan Sampson, like you said, Quinshon Judkins, and then I think got Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. So they got a lot of really good players, some very high value picks. I think Mason Graham is going to be very good. I'm not looking forward to seeing him play against our interior offensive line for the upcoming, 10 years probably. You never know how it goes, but they had some great picks. I think especially Harold Finn is your favorite player in their pick, in their draft at least. So,
Definitely. Yep.
he was so productive, and he's also a great combination to go with
David Njoku.
Yeah, Njoku.
Yeah.
He's a great combo to complement him very well. He's kind of a hybrid receiver tight end kind of.
I would agree.
He's not the best blocker, but that's where Njoku comes in. He's really big. They complement each other very well. So we'll see how it goes. And I think they're also looking out for the young quarterbacks. Having great tight ends is an awesome thing to have as a nice safety blanket for a quarterback, especially a young one. Look at all the best quarterbacks of all time. A lot of them had either a fantastic tight end or a great receiver. You got to have one. And they're trying to have both with that. So I think it's going to be. I think it was a very good draft for the Cleveland Browns.
I'd agree. Yeah, that's the same thought process I have when I look at their draft. Obviously, they added a lot of power on offense, a lot of firepower with Judkins, Sampson. Fannon's going to get open, which I think that's the best part of his game, his ability to get open, which is honestly underrated. I think a lot of people talked about his hands and how he has great hands, but no one really talked about the route running necessarily. But he always found a way to get open, just like Nick Nash even always finds a way to get open, which he ended up going undrafted, which was crazy in my eyes. Ends up going undrafted in
Where'd he end up?
Atlanta with the Falcons, which I think he ends up being wide receiver 2 day one. Yeah, legitimately, I think he's a wide receiver 2 day one. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. But I did like the Browns draft a lot. And then I'll let you get to your next one. I know you had the Browns as well.
Obviously, the teams that are the best in the league draft the best. It's consistent. You rarely see teams that can't draft that win a lot of games or win big games, win the playoffs. And Philadelphia is the perfect example. 3 of my top 10 players, they drafted with their first 3 picks, of course. Because they know exactly what they're doing. It seems every single year there's just players that for some reason fall, and then Philly's like, okay, I don't know how this guy's still there. I'm going to take him now. Got Jahad Campbell in the first round. They traded up 1 or 2 spots.
Yep.
I think it's smart just in case. Got Andrew Makuba, and then they got Ty Robinson out of Nebraska. And those are 3 fantastic players that I think are going to be very good. And a lot of people were saying, they reached time. I don't care if they reach time. You don't know, especially with them picking last. You don't know if they're going to be there in the next round. Just take the guy you're confident in. They also got shout out Drew Kendall, our Boston College guy. He's going to be great there. They're going to have him probably be able to play both positions. I think they have one of the best offensive line. Actually, they have the best offensive line coach in the league. So they're going to allow him to be able to learn both positions, be able to be versatile at center and guard. So I'm excited to watch. I'm happy he went to a winning program. I'm happy to watch him grow even more. He's a great guy, so that's going to be fantastic for him. And Jahad Campbell, of course. You're a Giants fan, so of course they got 2 fantastic, 2 of the best playmakers in the draft on defense. And they got Ty Robinson, who's just a big dude who's, I believe, 6'5",
big guy,
almost 300 pounds. He ran like a 4'8". He's very athletic. And he's going to be a lot to deal with. Him and Carter
and Jordan Davis.
It's like that's just a huge front. They know exactly what they're doing. They have drafted them and the Chiefs. It's not a coincidence. Those teams have been in the Super Bowl more than anybody else in the past 10 years outside of the Patriots. Subtract the Tom Brady era Patriots, and they just seem to draft very well every single year. It's not a coincidence. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, no, they always know how to draft, right? They always get the guys that fall in the draft somehow, some way. Jalen Carter ended up falling. Devontae Smith even fell a little bit, and then they ended up, getting him in the draft and trading up to get him. This is years ago, but over the years, they always get guys that fall to them every single year. Now Makuba falling to the end of the second round, Jahad Campbell end of the first round. Like Campbell was a guy me and you were both very high on. To land him at whatever pick it was, 31st, yeah. I think 31st overall, like that is huge because he's a great defensive player, a great leader, and being a Giants fan, it's just every single year it seems like they are always drafting in the trenches. Yep. Offensive line, defensive line, and that's why they win games. You need to win in those 2 areas. Offensive line, defensive line, that's where the games are won a lot of the time.
Yeah, of course. When you have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, he's going to do everything he's asked to do and what he's supposed to do. It works perfectly. Jahad Campbell is also a perfect compliment for Zach Bond, who I think they re-signed him already.
They did.
And again, that's another thing they do almost better than every other team is they just re-sign the guys who perform very well. And they know how to manage the contracts better than any other team. We'll see how it goes in 2029 when all these contracts are coming to fruition. But I think those 2 as a 1-2 combo for linebacker is going to be phenomenal. They had Oren Burks last year as an outside linebacker, and Jahad is going to be an outside linebacker weak side linebacker hybrid. You got Zach Brown in the middle. But one thing Jihad does very well, not only is he crazy athletic, he also is very knowledgeable of where everyone on the defense is supposed to be. If he needs to line and move somebody around a little bit based on what the offense is showing, he's very good at that. It's a very great combination. And of course, I was not shocked in the slightest that the Philadelphia Eagles continue to draft very well, and that leads into my next team, the Kansas City Chiefs, who is probably one of the most frustrating teams for me in the league because as a Bengals fan, we've kind of had a rivalry going on the past 5 years, and they do the same thing. They draft extremely well every single year. They draft players that just perform well in college. They might not be the biggest names, but they're always going to be consistent. My favorite pick was Noah Williams. I think it was the third round, yep. Yeah, third round pick.
85th overall, yep.
He was an All-American consensus, I believe, out of California.
Yep.
And him and Jalen Royals, who was out of Utah, and Ashton, I think it's Gilo T, out of Louisville, who was an edge guy. Those were my 3 favorite picks, and none of those guys were huge names coming in the draft, but they were all players that, every team was like, if we can get this guy in the second round, it's a great value pick. And they did. They just continue to do that. Noah Williams is a very good cornerback. I'm excited. I wish I could say I'm excited, but he's going to be very good for them, I think, especially with McDuffie. Having those 2 guys is a phenomenal defense backcourt. Jalen Rose is a guy I think you would like a lot. One of those smaller school, very productive wide receivers that kind of falls into the kind of players you like. So
definitely.
I think he'll make his way up to be, I don't know, I probably could see a Pro Bowl potential in him, obviously, with the offense that they run. He's a guy that's just going to be reliable. I think that's the key word for him is going to be reliable. Mm-hmm. And then, who wants to start about next?
And then one guy I want to mention really quick before I jump to my team, Josh Simmons, they drafted end of the first round, 32nd overall. Tackle at Ohio State. I know you're not too big on Ohio State offensive linemen typically, but I don't think it's a bad pick here, throwing a dot at the board, considering their offensive line. The tackles have been a problem for them the last couple of years. It's kind of been their only issue on the line. Interior, and they've paid some guys and they've drafted some guys, but it always seems to be the left tackle, right tackle. Whether or not they're good in the regular season, they get to the playoffs and they're always hurt, it seems like. They're always shifting guys in and out of that, lineup, in the offensive line. So not a bad thing to throw a dot at the board and see how things go there. I didn't know as much about him in the draft process, but I just remember he was a big guy, if I remember right, and also they needed to address offensive line. So.
National champion. Ohio State offensive linemen are always really tricky because they tend to have a lot of very good players in college, and then it's kind of similar to Alabama. They'll get drafted high, and then they won't end up being that great in the league because for whatever reason. But we'll see. I'm also not the biggest Ohio State fan, so maybe it's a little bit of my bias going there. But you really never know how it's going to go. You see them play very well against good teams. It's one thing that you really just got to look at their schedule. Look at the schedule they have because they always play against good teams, whether it's Michigan or Notre Dame or one of the SEC schools. They had Texas this year. Mm-hmm. Go watch them play against their best edge guys, and that's usually the best way you can evaluate it. But it's always hard. It's always hard to evaluate that position specifically.
Definitely, for sure. And we'll see how it pans out for them. As we addressed, already, they always figure out a way to stack up the offensive line, defensive line. They do a lot in free agency typically, and they keep the guys that matter. Chris Jones obviously has gotten paid multiple times by them. So they always find a way to build in the trenches and obviously try to make it a better team, around Patrick Mahomes. And you have a quarterback like that, you would take, shots at the top board, take best player available when you have a quarterback like that. So it helps.
Guys you're confident in. I mean, we don't know. These guys are all have conversations and interviews with these teams that we don't know how those goes. Mm-hmm. We never know. It's like you'd hear reports, but truthfully, you're not in the room, so we don't know. Mm-hmm. Goes into your next team, the Cowboys.
It's tough as a Giants fan having the Eagles on this list, having the Cowboys on this list, but I can't deny the value they got in some of these draft picks. Getting Donovan Ezeraku in day 2 is honestly a very impressive pick. I think they got him second round, and then Siobhan. Yeah, I can see.
No, he was early in the second round.
He was early second, kind of. I'll tell you right now. Maybe? He was 44th, so roughly middle of the second, but still the first half of it, which is still very good value.
Steal. He was a steal.
Very good value.
Him and Micah Parsons on the edge is going to be tough to deal with in your division.
100%. And that's the tough thing as a Giants fan. But I'm not going to deny they did get some good value on that pick, obviously. And then Siobhan Reveille Jr., a cornerback they took out of East Carolina. I don't know much about Reveille Jr. heading into the draft. It was during the draft they showed on the TV some of his story, which was amazing. He worked an overnight shift. He was working at Amazon at one point before he played for East Carolina. Had a tryout, like a prospect showcase, essentially, where he drove to East Carolina and turned heads at that showcase with his speed. Got a chance at East Carolina.
He's a big guy, right?
Yeah, bigger corner. Yeah, corner? Big corner and quick as well. Really turned heads with his speed and his athleticism. Made the best of that opportunity. Got an offer from East Carolina. Ended up going there and then forced 26 incompletions. Forced incompletions on 26% of his targets and coverage, which was really good. If I remember right, this was one of the top, among corners that were drafted after the first round, probably day 2. That was where that stat came from. But very impressive pick there, getting him. And then obviously Ezraku, a guy that you're very high on, a guy that you know personally. And they obviously have a good defensive front already, and now they're adding to it even more. The secondary was an issue in the past, so getting Ravel Jr. will be obviously.
It does make you wonder
there.
though with Micah Parsons. There's been a little bit of discrepancy, it seems, between what he wants as a contract and what their front office is willing to give. So I really wonder to see how if Donovan's pick affects. They're a very similar type of player, an outside linebacker, defensive end hybrid. So we'll see how that goes. I don't think it should, because you can't have too many great pass rushers. You never can. So they'd be smart to keep both, but you never know what's going through their minds. And they also drafted Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama, in the first round, who's a pretty solid guard, very stout, but we'll see. After Zach Martin retires, they're trying to refill there in the guard position. So we'll see how that goes. You never know. I think a lot of people at the time thought it was a reach, very, very much a reach for Booker. But at the same time, value offensive lineman, you got to keep your quarterback up. And offensive linemen are more important than any people realize. Most people realize that, they think playmakers and offensive lines, it's huge. It's very important. So I think interesting pick there for their first pick, because I think there were some other guys that might have been better options, but at the same time, hope for the best for these guys.
Definitely, for sure. And obviously, Ezraku could have been a day 1 guy, goes day 2, and that's just excellent value for them. So they're going to be very happy with that pick, going 44th overall. Great value. I'm sure that a lot of Cowboys fans are going to be a big fan of him pretty soon once the season begins. But I'll let you get to your next team.
We both have these guys on our list. The Patriots. They're kind of in a rebuild phase right now with their first overall pick. They had Will Campbell, who's the best lineman in the draft, in my opinion. He's going to be fantastic for them. I think they already have their quarterback, and what do they need next is they got to protect him. They also drafted Braden Swinson, who was one of my favorite edge guys. He was another top 10 player of mine, one of my favorite players. I think they got him in the 4th or 5th. So that was really a really good value pick in the 5th round. So he's fantastic. Go watch his film. He's a very good arsenal of pass rush moves. Gets off the ball very quickly, has a very high motor. I think he'll be a guy that's perfect for the Patriots, a guy who puts his head down, does the work, student of the game. I think he's going to be phenomenal for the Patriots. And then a guy you love as well, Kyle Williams, is one of those fantastically productive guys in college. And that's one thing you always got to look for is production. And he was the definition of production.
Yeah, you need a guy that creates separation. I think when you look at Drake May last year, even when they had Mac Jones a couple years ago, the Patriots had no receivers that could create separation. Kyle Williams can be that guy, very good route runner, good athleticism, good footwork. That's going to go a long way in that Patriots offense. Even if he's not a wide receiver 1, you're taking him in the 3rd round, 69th overall. You're taking a shot just to see if he can be wide receiver 2. That's probably better with the Patriots' gut, to be honest. If you look at the way things are with their depth chart over the last couple of years, the Patriots have been filled with wide receiver 2s and 3s. I know they added Stephon Diggs in the offseason, and obviously there's been a lot going on with him off the field. But when you add a guy like Kyle Williams, doesn't matter who's on the offense. Doesn't matter if you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, or you're the Patriots wide receivers for the last couple of years and you don't really have much speed. Adding a guy like Kyle Williams can help any offense. Any offense. Yeah. Even if he's not a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. Adding in a guy like him that can have speed and get off the line of scrimmage and actually get open will be a great asset to Drake May, which we talked about, I think, probably in our pre-draft episode. They needed to add to that offensive line and help with, weapons, and that's what they did. Obviously, getting a running back, getting a wide receiver, getting an offensive lineman. You could obviously see this was a point of emphasis for them.
Big time.
And they had a very good offseason, too, with the guys they signed. Harold Landry was a great pickup. Robert Spillane was a great pickup. And then they got that defensive lineman as well from the Eagles. Gave him a big payday. So they did a lot of stuff to try to build on defense in free agency, and then obviously in the draft, seems like a point of emphasis for them was on the offensive side of the ball, which had to happen. And I'm impressed with the Kyle Williams pick. As I said, even if he's not a wide receiver 1, if he could be wide receiver 2, that's better than what they have for the most part, heading into this year.
I think Patriots fans should be bullish. I think this season I could see them getting to 8 or 9 wins, which I would say, last year they got 3 or 4. Of course, they beat the Bengals in the first game. What a shocker. But just go to one more team before we go to our teams. Shout out Carolina Panthers. They drafted Nick Gordon and Princely Umanmielen, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah, I think so.
2 great defensive ends / as linebacker hybrids out of A&M and then Ole Miss. Both of them transferred from smaller schools, actually not smaller schools. Purdue, I think Nebraska too, and we got Mitchell Evans, tight end at Notre Dame. Those are 3 players I liked a lot in this draft. So I'm happy to see. You're a big Bryce Young guy. So,
I like Bryce Young a lot. I do.
So I think people really fail to understand that it's great to have amazing offensive weapons, but young quarterbacks giving them a good defense is just as important.
Definitely.
It's huge. You need to have a defense that can stop players when you need to, and not give up 40 points. You see it every single year. You see a team that can put up a lot of points on offense, but they'll end up losing the game because their defense can't get any stops. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I think they had a great draft. So I'm excited to see where they go. I actually like the Panthers a lot. And I'll shout out my buddy Luke Kandra that's out of Cincinnati. I don't understand how he went undrafted. It makes no sense to me, but. Don't be shocked if you see him as a Carolina Panther for the next 10 to 15 years. Honestly, he's a phenomenal player, phenomenal guy, so I'm really happy to see him there.
Definitely. It was a good pickup getting him. That was, once again, value. Just, I don't know how he fell out undrafted. I thought when he was in the 6th, 7th round, I'm like, the Giants, just take him. Why not?
Yep.
He's great value there, no matter what you think. And here's the thing. I know every player, gets scouted differently and stuff like that. Teams are going to see one guy's a 5th rounder, while some teams might see them as a 7th. But when you see a guy that could have gone 4th, 5th round, and he ends up being there in the 7th,
take him.
I would have thrown a dart at the board and saw how it went. But, it is what it is. Giants obviously missed out. Bengals missed out. A lot of teams missed out on him.
I agree.
We're wishing him the best. And they also drafted Tito McMillan as well, a guy I'm a fan of as well, adding a wide receiver. That was definitely a need for them, considering Adam Thielen's obviously getting up there in age. And they had Xavier Legette, who's a good receiver, but adding a guy like McMillan, who could be probably their wide receiver day one, hopefully.
Yeah,
I think that was a great
what you draft him. I think that they had an underrated, under the radar draft. They were great. Yeah,
definitely, for sure. And so this leads right into our Giants and Bengals draft. So we're going to break down how they did 1 through 7, so rounds 1 through 7. We'll go one by one. We'll start with the Giants since they picked first. Abdul Carter at number 3, an edge rusher out of Penn State. This is a guy that I wasn't that high on necessarily, probably in January and February, but as I got closer to the draft and started realizing more and more that the Giants legitimately could take him, I started watching more film, doing a little bit more reading on him, and this guy can be an explosive edge rusher right away, day one. And like you already noted, you can't have too many pass rushers, especially now the Giants have Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence on the inside, and you have Kayvon Thibodeau, and then you add a guy like Abdul Carter. It's kind of like the Giants of old, back in 2007, 2011, where there was just a flurry of pass rushers. The Giants had so many guys that they could throw at you. And you can never have too many pass rushers. Having an abundance of guys that can get to the quarterback, that's huge. You keep guys fresh, and obviously it'll be easier when you can, put one guy in a certain situation and a certain, coverage, and then you can obviously put a different guy in for another one. Like, these guys are all different pass rushes, which is nice. Obviously, you'll have Dexter Lawrence on the inside, and then at the edge, Carter, Thibodeau, Burns. They can all line up a little bit differently and do different things, which is really nice. But they all can get up for the quarterback, which is huge. I thought Thibodeau could be a guy they could potentially trade. I think he becomes a little bit more expendable now. We'll see how things go. If things are bad, which the Giants do have a very tough schedule. If things are bad midway through the season, would not be surprised to see them trade Thibodeau. But happy with the Carter pick. Did not want a quarterback here. If it wasn't Cam Ward, Giants listened and took Carter, so I'm happy with it. And then now we'll move over to the Bengals first-round pick.
Yeah, we got Shamar Stewart, defensive end out of Texas A&M. Initially, I wasn't the most thrilled with this pick. I've always been a huge production guy. That's all everyone's hearing about Shamar. But I went back and watched every single game from his junior season. They align him at a 4-eye a lot. When you're playing a defensive lineman at a 4-eye, it's inside shoulder of the tackle. He's not going to get the stats that you'd want him to get. Watching him play, he finds a way to disrupt every single play he's in, whether it's by using his leverage and pushing back the tackle, whether it's getting upfield and, he had a couple plays where he immediately shot out of a rocket, goes up there and hits both the quarterback and the running back on an inside zone. It's something that you can't really see. He's also, just one of these guys who is insanely athletic, 6'5", 260, very fast, very strong. Has a great personality based on everything I've listened to, read, and heard. The more I've grown, I don't know. It's not the guy I wanted at first, but the more I've done more research, read about it, I'm happy with the pick. I think he's very much potential to be a great player for the Bengals. My only worry is the Bengals have had an issue with developing young talent, especially on the defense. They drafted Myles Murphy in the first 2 years ago. They drafted what's his name? Well, Cam Taylor was second round. They have a lot of guys that they have not developed the way they should. Mm-hmm. That's also why you go out and get a guy like Al Golden. Mm-hmm. If they got Al Golden as the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, I think he's going to do a good job of developing these players. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll see. I think Shamar has a lot of potential as well, but they haven't signed into his rookie contract yet, and that's confusing to me because why do you draft a guy in the first round if you don't plan on paying him what he's worth? Mm-hmm. It's like then that just shows you shouldn't have drafted him if you don't think that. Mm-hmm. So pay him what he's worth. Do the guarantees you're supposed to do. He's a first round pick. That's what you're supposed to do. It's actually it's kind of wild the stark difference between how much money a first rounder makes versus even the 32nd pick versus the 33rd pick. Mm-hmm. I think they should get it done so we can start practicing, get him in OTAs and everything. I would love to see him have a great first year. I wouldn't be shocked if he at the end of the year has more sacks than he did his entire college career. It's 2 back-to-back picks where back-to-back first-round picks where the Bengals draft a guy who didn't play that much. I don't know if play that much is the right word, but didn't produce that much in college, and it worked very well for him last year. Mims, I think, is going to be a franchise right tackle. Marius Mims last year. So I want what's best for the guy. That's all I want. I hope he has a great career, especially for the Bengals. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited for him.
Definitely. And I think that's a guy that obviously wasn't on your top 10 prospects. We both had our favorite 10 prospects regardless of draft position, and draft projections in the process. And there were a lot of guys on the defensive line that you wanted and you were interested in, but I'm happy to hear that Stewart ends up being a guy that's grown on you, especially now since the draft. And now it's been a month, so obviously the dust has settled, and you can read up on guys, and there's obviously not as many headlines right now about a lot of these guys. So it's nice to be able to go back, look, and obviously see some potential there, which is great.
I probably didn't give him a fair chance before he got drafted, and then when they get drafted, you realize, okay, whether or not you like him or you don't, this is the draft they made, so you do more research on it. So I think the pressure is more on the Bengals to make use out of his play and to turn him into what he can be and find his potential. And he has to put in the work as well, and I don't doubt that. I think a lot of these things, whenever people have production issues, they wonder, okay, is it because he doesn't really like football like that? He doesn't try that hard? That's not a question for him. He's a guy that I guarantee will be in the weight room doing what he's supposed to do. He'll be watching film. He's never going to take plays off. So that's what I don't worry about. And that is a huge green flag and a check mark for him. So excited to see what he does.
Definitely. And I think, guys grow on you in the draft process. I think with the Giants, when they drafted Daniel Jones in 2019, was not a big fan of Daniel Jones. Probably for about 2 or 3 days after the draft as well, I wasn't happy. And then probably the 4th day after the draft ended and the Giants picked him, obviously 6th overall, read up on him, watched more of his film, watched a lot of his interviews, and I was like, okay, this is a guy I can get behind and be a fan of. And I think that's something with Stewart you see too, which is awesome. So if it goes anywhere with you and Stewart, how you feel about him than it did with me and Jones, you'll be the biggest fan of him in the world, as I am of Daniel Jones. So you might be the biggest Shamar Stewart's fan very soon, as I am of Daniel Jones. So
that would be ideal.
So we'll see how things go. But next up, the Giants did have another first-round pick, trading back into the first round with the Houston Texans, getting Jackson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss. Very impressive that the Giants were able to trade up and go get him, because I felt like he was going to go either top 15, top 20. I did say in December or January that I wanted them to trade back in to the end of the first round to get him. I think that was going to be the case because every year, obviously, teams overdraft the quarterback position.
Yep.
And so I was honestly shocked he ended up going 25th to the Giants because once Sanders and him fell out of the top 10, I was like, okay, now they're locks to go 11, 12, 15, somewhere in that range. So the Giants were lucky to trade up and get him. Didn't give up too much. They did give up their second to move up, obviously, to go to the 25th pick, and then did give up their third-round pick next year and a third this year because they had two of them. So basically a second and 2/3 for the 25th overall pick. So I think this was a great throwing at the dot board, and obviously there's a double entendre there with Jackson Dot being his name. They're throwing a dot at the board just to see how things would go. And the Giants now have a lot of quarterbacks. You have Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dot, and Tommy DeVito.
It's an interesting.
It's a crazy run.
Them and the Browns, they should just make a mini series on their entire camp for both those teams just to see how their quarterbacks are.
Out of their quarterback room, it's pretty crazy. They both have four guys. I think Jameis ends up being the one that's the odd man out. I think he either gets cut or traded, and then they roll DeVito over him as the third quarterback just because DeVito's cheaper, obviously.
Younger.
Winston is exactly younger too. So, and has been in the system too. DeVito's now been in the system for 2 years going on to 3 years. So I like this pick a lot from the Giants. Might as well take a shot and see how things go. I think there's a lot to like in Jackson Dott's game. There's definitely some things you have to work on. I think a lot of people talked about footwork at times as an issue, and maybe he had to go through his progressions off a blitz. But there were some stats I saw where he was great against the blitz, and then some people said he struggled against the blitz. So you never know until guys really get to the league, and obviously they're in that offensive system that they get drafted to. You never know how they'll pan out, but big fan of the Giants taking Dot here at 25th overall. And then we will move on to the second round. The Bengals had a second-round pick. The Giants did not.
I'm actually going to talk about both their second and fourth-round picks, as they're similar archetypes, but very different in a way. They're both linebackers. With the second round, their 49th overall pick was Demetrius Knight Jr., who was actually the guy I had them mock taking, so I was very excited to see this pick. I think a lot of people were knocking on him because he's a little bit older. Not a little bit. He's a fair amount older than most players that get drafted. But go watch his film. Go watch his tape from his senior year at South Carolina. He's a guy who's going to come in and day one make plays and should be your linebacker too after Logan Wilson. He's going to be a guy that I'm really excited to see how he responds to whatever criticism he's been given. If you listen to him talk, he also is a great guy. That's a key thing that the Bengals seem to draft very well as good people, at least under the Zach Taylor regime. So I'm excited to watch him. He's a very interesting story too. He was doing similar to Siobhan Rebel. He was doing DoorDash to help pay for his kid and his wife. And he was able to make some money with the NIL deals over at South Carolina. So I'm really excited. He's a guy that he just makes plays. It's like every single time South Carolina was in a pinch at the end of the game, he came away with either an interception, tackle for loss, sack, something. I'm excited to watch him. I really am. And then similarly, Barrett Carter Jr. Not Barrett Carter Jr. I don't think he's a junior. Barrett Carter, linebacker to Clemson. He's younger. He's faster. He's probably has a higher upside. I don't know if he'll be as impactful day one, but at the same time, those are the kind of guys you want to have. You want to have the kind of guys who you draft in the later fourth or fifth round that will have an impact on the game, whether it's the year one, whether it's year two, whether it's a guy you're going to have for their entire career. He's kind of a guy like that, and I'm excited to watch him play. Both those guys. The Bengals had never really prioritized linebacker, which is weird to me because it's a very important position. And drafting two linebackers this year, it's very similar to what they did back with Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, who I expect to move off Jermaine Pratt. I'm surprised they haven't yet, but they're going to. You don't draft two linebackers and then sign one in the free agency if you don't plan on moving off of one. So those are my two favorite picks. So I'm really excited for those. But so let's go on to your picks as well.
Yeah, go back to the Giants, the third-round pick, taking Darius Alexander, a defensive tackle out of Toledo.
I liked him a lot.
You know me, I love small schools. I like the MAC a lot, so Toledo I am a fan of. I always like small school guys. I feel like there's a lot of gems there, and this is a guy you were a big fan of. You knew more about him than I did. This is a guy that was a run-stopping defensive tackle. It's probably going to be on the inside right next to Dexter Lawrence day one. The Giants, obviously, a point of emphasis for them was figuring out the defensive line and strengthening that even more. And they already had a strong one, but now they strengthened it even more than they even needed to, getting Carter, getting Alexander. That's obviously been something that they've wanted to do the last year. Obviously adding Brian Burns a year ago, and then obviously now in the draft, this is a point of emphasis for them. So really like this pick for them. You throw him next to Dexter Lawrence, probably going to have a really good year considering Dexter Lawrence is going to be the point of emphasis for most opposing offensive lines, I should say. So Alexander might be the guy that people kind of forget about, and I'm sure he can be making big plays. I know you were a big fan of him in the pre-draft process.
Yeah, I met him at the combine as well. Very high character guy, and he works very hard. All these guys who come out of the MAC are going to work very hard. High upside as well. I think he's very talented. So it's a great pick for you. I was really excited to see him go to the Giants.
Definitely. And that was part of the reason I thought the Giants had a top 5 draft, which my top 5, your top 5, we had a lot of similarities. Obviously, Browns, Patriots, Eagles. I had the Giants and the Cowboys. You had the Chiefs and the Panthers in yours. Like, a lot of those teams, point of emphasis for them was offensive line, defensive line. At least not every single one of them maybe went with that in their first few picks, but offensive line, defensive line was a point of emphasis, at least in their day 1 and day 2 picks, and that's, you can obviously see with the Giants, 2 of their top 3 picks were on the defensive side of the ball and on the defensive line. So now moving over to the Bengals' 3rd pick, taking Dylan Fairchild.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to go with the pairs. When we drafted pairs of offensive linemen and a pair of linebackers. So they got Dylan Fairchild, the guard out of Georgia. A lot of Bengals fans really wanted him to draft the other guard, who I believe ended up going to the Lions. But I do like Dylan Fairchild a lot. I mean, watching him play more, watching his film, I think has a lot of upside. It seemed like he has a very good rapport with Scott Peters, who's our new offensive line coach. My only worry with Dylan, it's not even really his fault, is are they just going to throw him in there and expect him to be a day 1 starter in the interior offensive line of a team that drops back and pass 50 times a game? And it's like, that's hard to do. There's no reason why the Bengals shouldn't go out and get a veteran like Brandon Scherf. He's still out there right now. There's zero reason why they shouldn't go out and draft a guy and pick up a guy like Brandon Scherf. You have him for a year or 2. You allow guys like Dylan Fairchild to grow behind them. And then go back to Jalen Rivers. He's a really big body who has potential to be a swing lineman who can play guard and tackle. And I think it's part of why they wanted to draft him with the versatility he has. I thought he was a very good value pick as well in the 5th round out of Miami. So I think those are 2 very solid offensive linemen. My only worry is, one, can you develop them? We've seen the Bengals have been very poor developing offensive and defensive linemen, really for the past 5 or 6 years. So that's a big question mark. And again, it's much less on them; it's more on the Bengals. And same goes for doing what you can do to make it easier on them. When you go to get a guy like Brandon Scherf, you have Scherf start. If he gets hurt, you have guys who can come in and fill in behind him. But you also have guys who can learn from this guy. He was an All-Pro for Washington. He was coming out of – is he still – where was he at? Washington this past year?
Washington still, yep.
He's a fantastic player. You can never go wrong with offensive linemen from Iowa, I'll tell you that much. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited, though. I think those 2 guys can be great. It really just, like I said, more of a question of the Bengals, less on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, you got to keep the quarterback upright, so they're also going to take some shots.
Especially when they pass more than any team in the league, which is fine, but you also need to protect them. You also have to do what you can to find the correct players to fit around them. That's why you go get these, I don't know why you don't spend big. One of these days, just go. If you go all in,
open the checkbook.
Just do it. There's no reason not to go after a guy like Brandon Scherf. I think he will immediately make your team significantly better. If you told me the Bengals re-signed T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, added Brandon Scherf, they added T.J. Slayton, who was a defensive run stopper, who's kind of going to fill a DJ Reader role from Green Bay, and added a couple other solid role players, I would say it's a very successful offseason. Mm-hmm. They're missing that. They're still missing that one. There's no reason to go into the season with either knowing you're going to have to basically start a rookie. Or a guy who should probably be a backup, and I'm forgetting his name, but they picked him up out of New Orleans, Lucas Patrick. I think he is going to be one of those guys who would be a fantastic, you're getting some injuries in there, throw him in. He's getting a little late in his career. He's still a good protector. But at the same time, when you have a guy like Joe Burrow, you want to be sure this is the guard that needs to be starting. This needs to be a top 20 guard, which is not asking for that much, top 15, 20 guard. And we've seen the interior offensive line of the Bengals, outside of Karras, been the biggest struggle their past couple of years because when you play in the AFC North, you play against great defensive linemen. Last year when we played Dexter Lawrence, he destroyed us. Mm-hmm. The interior offensive line, that's where a lot of these sacks come from, is mostly the interior offensive line because they've beefed up their tackles pretty well with Orlando Brown Jr. and Marius Mims. So they have those guys for a while, but you also draft a guy like Jalen Rivers because you expect him to be able to learn both positions. So that's my thing. I like the picks. more on the Bengals. Let's see them do the right things with the remaining offseason, the remaining money they have, and hopefully the coaches can develop these players. You saw I was never a fan of Frank Pollock, who was their offensive line coach the past 5 or 6 years, and I am happy he's no longer on the team as a coach. So I'm excited to see this Scott Peters as a new coach. I think he has an intensity that the Bengals need very bad, and I think he will bring that with these new players.
So then in the 4th round, the Giants took Cam Scadaboo, running back out of Arizona State, which honestly, you could see what the Giants were doing with this draft. Point of emphasis for them was drafting guys that were tough, strong, resilient, that were going to play bully, old-school football.
They're also proven.
Improving, exactly. That's what they were going
a lot
for
of these
here.
players are proven in college.
Definitely, and I think that's what Joe Shane, Brian Dable saw is obviously their jobs are on the line. They need guys that are proven that can step in right away, and they are building an identity similar to what the Giants won with back in 2007, 2011. Those teams, you have strong, tough, bully ball mentality. Brandon Jacobs out of the backfield, just like now you have Cam Scadaboo, tough, strong running backs that look for contact. And obviously the Giants have had good running backs. I mean, Tiki Barber they've had over the years, Saquon Barkley. Like, they've had good, strong running backs. But I don't think they've had a guy like Scadaboo who looks for contact, which Saquon, very versatile, agile running back, the best running back in the NFL. Scadaboo's a little bit different because he's looking for contact. I think the Giants, when they drafted these guys, Darius Alexander looks for contact. When he's on that interior part of the defensive line, he's not afraid to go up, make contact, throw himself in, trying to make a run-stopping play. And then you look at Scadaboo, similar identity, just a running back, old school, as I said, bully football. And then they took, in the 5th round, Marcus Embo, an offensive lineman out of Purdue, who was projected 3rd round, ended up falling to the 5th round, which I think here it was injury worries with him, and that's why he ended up falling. But great value there, considering he could have gone 3rd round. And the Giants obviously need, just like you said, just like the Bengals, interior offensive line is a problem for the Giants, and staying healthy is a problem for the Giants as well in the offensive line. And then in the 7th round, the Giants took a tight end and a cornerback. A tight end, Thomas Fidone, the 2nd out of Nebraska. A guy, Matt Rule, the head coach of Nebraska, is a big fan of. I was listening to Peter Schrager after the draft happened, and he was saying how Matt Rule, one of his favorite plays he's coached in recent years, was Fidone, a guy that, similar to the guys I already mentioned, tough, strong, resilient. This guy came back from multiple leg injuries in college. And obviously the Giants need some help blocking from the tight end position, so they go out and get him. And then their last pick was Corey Black, a cornerback out of Oklahoma State, which, like the rest of these guys, tough, strong, versatile as well, which the Giants need a versatile corner who can kind of play inside and outside, work in between. So we'll see how things go, but I really did like this Giants draft overall. Like I said, the identity you could tell was they want to draft guys that were similar to that 2007, 2011 team, guys that are strong, looking for contact.
Like Chris
They're not
Snead.
afraid. Exactly. Tough guys that can play in the trenches, that aren't afraid, obviously, of, making, big-time contact, making a play, whether it's a running back or...
Speaking of Chris Snead, and going back to Marcus Membo, interior offensive line is probably the most underrated position group in the entire in football. Look at the teams who have had the best interior offensive lines the past 5 or 6 years: the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Ravens,
Lions.
and the Lions.
Yeah.
And it's not a coincidence. And it's like, tackle is very important. It's very important. Don't get me wrong. It's probably more important, but at the same time, you cannot neglect these position groups. You can't just expect, we'll find someone. It's like, no, you have to value these, and you have to value them. So that's why I'm excited for these Bengals picks. With our last pick, we have Taj Brooks, a running back out of Texas Tech. He was one of my favorite guys in the draft as well. I had him mocked in a couple of my mock drafts for the Bengals, but he's a guy, crazy production out of Texas Tech. A little bit smaller, but very quick, very fast, and he does exactly what he's supposed to do. He's very reliable, and this might be the best running back room the Bengals have had in the Burrow era. I mean, they got Chase Brown as number 1. They got Samaje Perine coming back. He was the guy who went to the Super Bowl with us. Zach Moss, he had a couple injuries, a neck injury, but he took a pay cut. He's coming back. So he's a guy that's going to be fit in very well with those 3 players. And having a running back, I don't even know what we would call it, with those
committee?
4. Committee with those 4. That's huge. Chase Brown needs to take the most snaps. I really hope that remains the case. When Zach Moss got out last year, Chase Brown really emerged as a true running back number 1. But when you have these other guys that can very easily add value, do it. Throw them in there, and when you need some fresh legs, you got some guys that can do it. So overall, I'd probably give the Bengals like a B plus.
That's awesome.
I think if you would ask me the day after the draft, I'd probably would have said like a C+. But I think the more I've done reflection, they address the position groups they needed, which is one. It can be a positive and a negative, but I do usually like to go for the guys who are going to come in and make immediate impact. So I usually draft, player over need. But at the same time, I still was happy with a lot of the picks they made. They didn't make any it was very predictable. It was a very Bengals draft, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Usually the Bengals don't draft amazing, but they usually don't draft horribly. They draft right in the middle of the pack, usually, which can be frustrating at times. But at the same time, I still think they have time to bolster their offensive line, get some more cornerback and safety depth. I want to see them go after Justin Simmons. I want to see them go after Brandon Scherf. If they add those two to this roster, I will say this is a very successful offseason.
Yeah.
But you never know. You don't know what they're going to do. They have money. I think they still have around $40 million in cap space. You could still spend the money, and they really should, because trust me, as a Bengals fan, you get one Super Bowl, you're set for a long time. You've been to one, and we're still, okay. But we can't have these slow starts again like we've had the past couple of years. And the big reason because of that is not having that offensive line who is like a well-oiled machine. That's what I want out of offensive line. They have the weapons they need. They have wide receiver 1 and 2 for sure. They have a committee for wide receiver 3. They got a committee of running backs, like you said. I expect their defense to take a step up, playing young guys. And I'm excited to see where they go. I think Al Golden is going to simplify things. He's going to trust his young players. It seemed like there wasn't a lot of alignment with the front office and how Lou Enrico wanted to run his plays. You can't draft multiple defensive players in the first round and not use them. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm excited to see what Al Golden does. I think all we're asking for is a top 15, 20 off defense. We're not asking for the best defense in the league. We're just asking to not be a bottom 3.
Yeah.
Which I expect them to get better with. They're going to have younger guys who are fast. They're going to have guys coming off injuries who I think are going to bounce back. And I'm excited. I think overall the Bengals do this every single year to me, but we'll see what we can do. When you have Burrow, you got Jamar, anything can really happen. If you told me they won 9 games again, I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't be that shocked. If you told me they won 14 games, I wouldn't be shocked, because they can. They very easily can. They have the best offensive weapons and the best quarterback in the league. People act like that's all you need, and it's so far from the truth, because overall their roster probably around 14 or 15, top to bottom, just because it's super top heavy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, you can't just expect a quarterback and 2 receivers to bring you to victory. That's not how it works in the NFL. And I think casual fans, or people just don't really want to delve into it as much as they should, just see, great quarterback or receiver. How are you not winning more games? It's because there's a lot of moving pieces. It's the most complicated sport, really, out of all the big 4 sports for sure. Just the most moving pieces. Play calling matters a lot. I wonder how they're going to change their offseason program this year to address late bad starts. I'm excited. So we'll see how it goes. I appreciate you having me on. This was a great time, and always love talking football.
Yeah, this was awesome having you on. Loved hearing your thoughts on the Bengals draft, which, going with B, I would probably say the same thing. B for them. I'm going to go A for the Giants. But very happy overall with the way the 2 drafts did work out for our teams. And obviously you never know how things will pan out until you get on the field and, September rolls around. But we can obviously look forward to football season. I'm sure we'll have you back on before the season begins. We'll give our predictions and our thoughts. But thank you so much for your time, Spencer. Always a great time talking with you. No one knows the game, like from an X's and O perspective. You know it better than anybody I know. Truly, you know it very strong as a player.
I don't know about that, Joey, but I appreciate that a lot. I'll tell you that much.
As a player, though, and obviously you played Division I football, you played big-time high school football. You know the game from a different perspective than a common fan would, that just watches on TV. So having you on, bringing your insight is definitely an asset to this podcast. So thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Hopefully have you on again soon.
Thanks, Joey. Appreciate you.